"Hey, step back, or I will arrest you too. How dare you scratch my car and lie?" The words cut through the festival air like a blade as Officer Derek Martinez's hand moved toward his handcuffs. 8-year-old Bethany Miller was sobbing uncontrollably now, her tiny frame shaking as she watched the growing crowd of onlookers. The scratched police car bumper seemed insignificant compared to the scene unfolding before dozens of festival-goers who had stopped their afternoon fun to witness what was becoming an absolute nightmare. "Nobody's coming to save you, kid. Nobody cares about your kind around here." The words hit 8-year-old Bethany Miller like a physical blow as Officer Derek Martinez loomed over her, his face twisted with the kind of hate that should never be directed at a child. What had started as a simple accident, her bike scratching his patrol car, had transformed into something far more sinister. This wasn't about property damage anymore. This was about power, prejudice, and a grown man in uniform using his badge to terrorize a little black girl who had no one to protect her. This was about power, prejudice, and a grown man in uniform using his badge to terrorize a little black girl who had no one to protect her. "Please, sir, I'm sorry about your car," Bethany whimpered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My mommy will be here soon. She'll pay for it, I promise." Martinez's laugh was like ice water. "Your mommy?" He crouched down, getting in her face with a cruel smile. "Let me tell you something about your mommy, little girl. She's probably strung out somewhere, or shacked up with some thug, or working the night shift at some fast food joint." He spat the words like they tasted bitter. "You people are always lying, always pretending to be something you're not." The crowd of festival-goers had grown, forming a circle around this horrific scene. Families with their children, couples enjoying their afternoon, elderly people who should have known better. All of them just standing there, watching a police officer psychologically torture an 8-year-old child. "She is in special forces," Bethany screamed through her sobs, her tiny fists clenched at her sides. She's coming at 3 o'clock, she promised." "Nobody's coming to save you," Martinez repeated, savoring each word. "So you better start telling me the truth about where your real guardian is, because I'm about to take you somewhere they know how to deal with kids like you." The sight of a grown man in uniform terrorizing an 8-year-old child was beyond disturbing. Bethany looked so small, so helpless, standing there in her bright festival dress that her grandmother had carefully picked out for this special day. She didn't understand racism. She didn't understand prejudice. All she knew was that the scary police officer didn't believe her about her mommy, and no one was helping her. But what Officer Derek Martinez didn't know, what his racist assumptions couldn't comprehend, was that at that very moment, 3 miles away, military boots were moving with deadly purpose across the secured floors of Fort Harrison's command center. These boots had walked through war zones, stood in the Pentagon's inner chambers, and commanded respect from the highest levels of military leadership. The woman wearing those boots had just received an urgent text from base security about a situation involving her daughter at the community festival. Her classified briefing had run over, making her 15 minutes late for their 3 p.m. meeting. But that text changed everything. Those boots were now moving faster, toward a black government SUV, carrying someone whose security clearance was so high that Martinez couldn't even dream of the power she wielded. Someone who was about to show him exactly what happened when you threatened her 8-year-old daughter. The owner of those boots was climbing into a black government SUV right now, her jaw tight with frustration at the delayed briefing, completely unaware that her baby girl was facing the worst moment of her young life. In less than 10 minutes, those boots would be stepping out of that SUV and onto the festival pavement. And Officer Martinez was about to learn a lesson about assumptions that would haunt him for the rest of his career. If you can already feel the justice coming and want to see Martinez get exactly what he deserves for terrorizing an 8-year-old child, smash that subscribe button right now, because what happens when those boots hit the pavement will leave you speechless. Before we start the story, if you believe in justice, type justice in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. You will get a supporting comment from Living Stories. 8-year-old Bethany Miller had been counting down the hours all week long. Today was Saturday, the day of the Maple Grove Community Festival, and more importantly, it was the day she finally got to spend time with her mom after weeks of barely seeing her. Bethany wasn't like most kids her age. While her classmates complained about homework, she was on the honor roll. While they struggled with reading, she was devouring books 3 grade levels above her own. Her teachers always said she was mature for her age, responsible beyond her years, which is exactly why her mom trusted her to wait alone at the festival until she could get there. You see, Bethany's mom worked at Fort Harrison, the military installation just outside Maple Grove. For the past month, she'd been consumed with what she called important work. Assignments that kept her at the base late into the evening, meetings she couldn't talk about, phone calls she had to take in private. Bethany didn't understand all the details, but she knew her mom was doing something significant, something that mattered. The plan was simple. Bethany would get dropped off at the festival at 2 p.m. by her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She'd enjoy the rides, maybe get some cotton candy, and wait patiently until 3 p.m. when her mom would arrive straight from work. It was going to be perfect, their first real afternoon together in weeks. Meanwhile, just 3 miles away at the festival, Officer Derek Martinez was having the kind of day that matched his personality perfectly. Martinez wasn't just any cop. He was a 15-year veteran with a reputation that preceded him. His fellow officers knew him as the guy who saw patterns where others saw people. To Martinez, the world was simple. Some people belonged, and others didn't. Some neighborhoods were worth protecting, and others were worth watching. Martinez had specifically requested patrol duty for the Maple Grove Festival because, in his words, you never know what kind of riffraff might wander into a nice neighborhood. He drove slowly through the festival grounds, his eyes scanning for what he called troublemakers. Which, if you knew Martinez, meant anyone who didn't look like the white suburban families that populated Maple Grove. The festival was everything you'd expect from a small suburban community. Families spread out on blankets, children running between game booths, the smell of funnel cake and barbecue mixing in the warm afternoon air. White picket fence America at its finest. Exactly the kind of scene Martinez felt it was his duty to protect from outside influences. Bethany arrived right on schedule, her eyes wide with excitement as she took in all the sights and sounds. She had $20 in her pocket, money her mom had given her with strict instructions to have fun but stay in the main festival area. She rode a few rides, played some games, and kept checking her phone for the time. 2:30 p.m., 2:45 p.m., getting closer to when her mom would arrive. That's when she decided to ride her bike around the festival perimeter, just to burn off some of her excited energy before her mom got there. It was a small bike, bright pink with streamers hanging from the handlebars. Clearly a child's bike, clearly harmless. But as Bethany pedaled around the edge of the festival grounds, something went wrong. Maybe it was her excitement, maybe it was the uneven ground, or maybe it was just one of those accidents that happen when you're 8 years old and the world feels full of possibilities. Her bike wobbled, she overcorrected, and before she could stop herself, she had bumped right into the side of a parked police cruiser. The scratch was tiny, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Most adults would have shrugged it off, maybe asked if the little girl was okay, perhaps even laughed about childhood accidents. But Officer Derek Martinez wasn't most adults. The sound of metal against metal brought him out of the car like a man possessed. "Hey, hey," he shouted, his voice carrying across the festival grounds with an aggression that immediately caught people's attention. "What do you think you're doing?" Bethany, still sitting on her bike, looked up at this angry police officer with confusion and growing fear. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to what? Damage police property?" Martinez was already pulling out his phone, taking pictures of the microscopic scratch like he was documenting a major crime scene. Do you have any idea what it costs to repair a police vehicle? I'm really sorry, Bethany stammered, climbing off her bike with shaking hands. My mom will pay for it when she gets here. She'll be here at 3 o'clock. That's when Martinez really looked at her for the first time. An 8-year-old black girl, alone at a festival in a predominantly white neighborhood. In his mind, the pieces fell into place exactly the way his prejudices told him they should. Your mom? He said, his tone shifting from angry to suspicious. And where exactly is your mom right now? She's at work, Bethany said, her voice getting smaller as she sensed the growing hostility. She works at the military base. She's coming to get me when she's done. Martinez's eyebrows shot up mockingly. The military base? Really? And what does your mom do at this military base? Bethany straightened up a little, pride creeping into her voice despite her fear. She's in special forces. She'll be here soon. That's when Officer Derek Martinez began to laugh. Not a chuckle, not a smile, a full, theatrical laugh that seemed to echo across the festival grounds. It was the kind of laugh that stopped conversations, that made people turn to look, that announced to everyone within earshot that something was happening. Special forces? He repeated between laughs. You're telling me your mommy is in special forces? The laughter continued, growing louder and more cruel with each passing second, as a crowd began to gather on what was quickly becoming the most uncomfortable scene the Maple Grove Community Festival had ever witnessed. Martinez's laughter died down, but the cruelty in his eyes intensified. He looked down at 8-year-old Bethany Miller, like she was something he'd scrape off his shoe, and what came out of his mouth next would haunt everyone who heard it. Special forces? Right. His voice dripped with contempt as he emphasized each word. You people are always making up stories, aren't you? Always pretending to be something you're not. The phrase, you people, hung in the air like poison. The crowd of festival goers that had gathered to watch this spectacle shifted uncomfortably, but not one adult stepped forward. Not one person told this police officer that he was out of line. They just stood there, creating a circle around a terrified 8-year-old who was facing down a racist cop all by herself. I'm not making it up. Bethany's voice cracked with desperation. My mom really is in the special forces. She has medals and everything. Martinez bent down to her eye level, his face twisted with mock concern that fooled no one. Oh, really? Then where are these medals? Where's your proof? Show me a picture. Show me some identification. Show me anything. Bethany's small hands went to her empty pockets, then to her small backpack. She had nothing. No photos, no identification, no way to prove what she knew to be true. She was 8 years old at a community festival. Why would she carry military documents? I don't have any with me, she whispered, and Martinez's smile became predatory. Typical, he said, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. No proof, because it's all lies. Just like I thought. But Martinez wasn't done destroying this child's spirit. His 15 years on the force had taught him exactly how to read people, or so he thought, and everything about this situation fit his prejudiced worldview perfectly. Let me guess, he continued, his voice getting louder, more performative for his audience. Single mother, right? Probably on welfare, probably doesn't even know who your daddy is. That's why you're here alone, making up fairy tales about your mama being a soldier. The crowd gasped audibly at this. Several people looked genuinely shocked that a police officer would speak this way to a child, but still nobody moved. Nobody intervened. They just watched as this man systematically destroyed an 8-year-old's sense of safety and dignity. She's not on welfare, Bethany screamed, her fear finally giving way to anger. My mom works hard. She protects people. She's a hero. A hero? Martinez laughed again, but this time it was darker, more vicious. Sweetheart, heroes don't abandon their kids at festivals in neighborhoods they don't belong in. Urban families like yours, you just don't understand how things work in places like Maple Grove. There it was, the mask completely off. Martinez wasn't even pretending this was about the scratched car anymore. This was about a black child in a white neighborhood, and in his twisted mind, that was crime enough. Bethany didn't understand half of what he was saying. She didn't know what urban families meant, didn't understand why he kept using phrases like "you people" and "your kind." She was 8 years old. All she knew was that this scary police officer hated her for reasons she couldn't comprehend, and nobody was helping her. "My mom will be here soon," she said, but her voice was getting smaller, less confident. For the first time, doubt was creeping in. Not doubt about her mother's love or her mother's truth, but doubt about whether anyone would believe an 8-year-old black girl over a police officer in uniform. The crowd was getting larger now. What had started as a handful of curious onlookers had grown into a substantial gathering. Some faces showed genuine concern for the child. Others displayed uncomfortable fascination with the drama unfolding, and a few seemed to agree with Martinez's assessment. But they all had one thing in common. They were all just watching. A woman near the back whispered to her husband, "Should we do something? She's just a little girl." But her husband shushed her, pointing to Martinez's badge. "Don't get involved with police business," he muttered. Meanwhile, Bethany kept glancing at her watch. 2:55 p.m. Her mom would be here any minute. She had to be. She was never late, never broke a promise. All Bethany had to do was hold on for 5 more minutes. But Martinez saw her checking the time, and it only fueled his cruelty. "What's wrong, kid? Starting to realize your imaginary mama ain't coming?" That's when Martinez made a decision that would escalate this situation beyond anything the festival goers had expected. He pulled out his radio and called for backup. "Unit 47 requesting assistance at the community festival. I've got a minor here, possible abandonment situation, need to transport to juvenile services." The words hit the crowd like ice water. Several people exchanged worried glances. Even those who had been staying silent were starting to look uncomfortable with where this was heading. Within minutes, another police cruiser arrived, and Officer Johnson stepped out. Johnson was younger than Martinez, newer to the force, and immediately something felt different about his approach. He looked at the scene, a crying 8-year-old surrounded by dozens of adults, his partner red-faced with anger over what appeared to be a minor bike accident, and his expression showed confusion. "What's the situation here, Martinez?" Johnson asked, his tone professional but questioning. "Kid damaged police property, claims her mother is in special forces," Martinez said with that same mocking tone. "Obviously lying, no guardian present. I'm thinking we need to take her in for processing." Johnson looked down at Bethany, then at the tiny scratch on the car, then back at his partner. "She's 8 years old, Derek. Maybe we should just—" "Are you questioning my judgment, Johnson?" Martinez's voice carried a warning that made several people in the crowd step back. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I know a troubled kid when I see one." Bethany's watch read 3:05 p.m. now. Her mom was 5 minutes late, which was unusual but not unprecedented. Sometimes work ran over. She pulled out the small flip phone her mom had given her for emergencies and dialed her mother's number with shaking fingers. Please answer," she whispered, but after 4 rings it went to voicemail. Her mom's voice, strong and confident. "You've reached Colonel Sarah Miller. I'm unavailable at the moment, but please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible." Martinez heard the voicemail message and erupted into cruel laughter. "Colonel, did you hear that, Johnson? Now she's promoting her imaginary mama to colonel." But there was something in that voicemail message that should have given Martinez pause. Something in the professional tone and crisp diction that suggested this wasn't the voice of someone working at McDonald's. Unfortunately, his racism was louder than his common sense. "Face it, kid," Martinez said, his voice carrying across the entire crowd. "Your mom probably doesn't even know who your daddy is, let alone where you are right now. That's why she ain't picking up, because she's got better things to do than keep track of the lies you tell." That comment finally pushed some people in the crowd too far. A middle-aged woman stepped forward slightly, her voice shaking but determined. "Officer," She's just a child. Maybe you could. Ma'am, step back and let us do our job, Martinez snapped at her, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. The woman immediately stepped back, fear replacing her brief moment of courage. If you're feeling sick to your stomach, watching this grown man terrorize an innocent 8-year-old, and you want to see him get exactly what's coming to him, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will make your heart race. Bethany tried calling her mother again. Once again, straight to voicemail. 3:10 p.m. Where was she? Her mom had never, ever been this late without calling. For the first time since this nightmare began, Bethany felt something worse than fear or anger. She felt abandoned. But what none of them knew was that 3 miles away, Colonel Sarah Miller was just walking out of the most classified briefing of her career, completely unaware that her daughter was facing the worst moment of her young life. By 3:15 p.m., the situation had reached a boiling point. Officer Martinez was now openly discussing juvenile detention with Officer Johnson, while 8-year-old Bethany Miller sat on the curb, her small frame shaking with exhaustion from crying. The crowd had grown to nearly 50 people, but still nobody had found the courage to truly stand up to a police officer who was clearly abusing his power. "I'm telling you, Johnson, we need to get social services down here," Martinez was saying, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "This kid's obviously been abandoned. Probably happens all the time with families like this." Bethany had called her mother 6 more times. 6 more times it had gone straight to voicemail. With each unanswered call, Martinez's cruel smile grew wider and Bethany's hope grew smaller. Maybe he was right. Maybe her mom really wasn't coming. Maybe everything she believed about her mother, about her family, about herself, was just the fantasy of an 8-year-old who didn't understand how the world really worked. "She's coming," Bethany whispered to herself, but even she was starting to doubt it. That's when they heard it, the low hum of a powerful engine approaching the festival grounds. Martinez looked up from his paperwork, irritated by the interruption, and saw exactly what he expected to see, a black SUV with government plates pulling into the parking area. "Finally," he announced to the crowd, his voice filled with vindictive satisfaction. "Social services is here. Time to take this kid where she belongs. Somewhere they know how to deal with abandoned children from broken homes." The crowd shifted nervously as the SUV came to a stop about 30 feet away from where Bethany sat. Martinez straightened his uniform, clearly pleased with himself for handling what he saw as a textbook case of urban decay, infiltrating a nice suburban community. "You see that kid?" he called over to Bethany, pointing at the SUV. "That's your ride. Hope you enjoyed your little adventure in the suburbs, because you're going back to where you came from." But Bethany wasn't looking at Officer Martinez anymore. She was staring at that SUV with an expression that was shifting from despair to something else entirely. Something that looked almost like recognition. The driver's side door opened, and the first thing visible was a pair of military boots. Not just any boots. These were polished to a mirror shine, regulation military issue, the kind that had walked through places most people couldn't imagine. They hit the pavement with authority, with purpose, with the kind of confidence that comes from years of command. Martinez was still talking to the crowd, still explaining how this was exactly what he'd expected to happen when those boots began walking toward them. Slow, measured steps. The kind of walk that military personnel develop after years of service. Not rushed, not casual, but absolutely unstoppable. "Ma'am," Martinez called out without even looking directly at the approaching figure. "I've got a minor here, possible abandonment case. Parents claiming military service but obviously fabricated. The kid needs to be processed through appropriate channels." But something strange was happening in the crowd. People were starting to straighten up. Conversations were dying mid-sentence. There was something about the presence approaching them that commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with respect. The boots were followed by perfectly pressed military dress pants. then a uniform jacket that even from a distance was clearly covered in decorations. This wasn't some social services worker coming to collect a troublesome child. This was someone who belonged in rooms where national security decisions were made. Martinez finally looked up from his paperwork, and his confident expression began to falter. The person approaching them wasn't at all what he had expected. This was a woman in full military dress uniform, her bearing so unmistakably professional that even Martinez's prejudiced mind couldn't immediately dismiss her. But it was when she came into full view that the entire festival grounds seemed to hold its breath. Colonel Sarah Miller stood before them in her dress blues, every decoration earned through years of service that most people could never comprehend. The Purple Heart spoke of wounds sustained in combat. The Bronze Star reflected valor under enemy fire. The Combat Action Badge showed she had faced death and prevailed. And there, unmistakably displayed on her uniform, was the Special Forces tab that Martinez had been mocking for the past hour. She carried a briefcase marked with security classifications that required clearances most government officials would never achieve. Her posture was perfect, her expression calm but alert, and her presence filled the space around her with an authority that made Martinez's badge and uniform look like children's dress-up clothes. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the festival music in the background seemed to fade as Colonel Sarah Miller approached the scene where her 8-year-old daughter sat on a curb, surrounded by police officers and dozens of gawking strangers. "Mommy?" Bethany's voice was barely a whisper, but in that silence, everyone heard it. Sarah Miller's eyes swept the scene, taking in every detail with the kind of tactical assessment that had kept her alive in combat zones around the world. Her daughter, clearly distressed and crying. A police officer who looked like he was about to have a stroke. A crowd of people who suddenly couldn't meet her gaze. A situation that was about to be resolved in a way that none of them had anticipated. When she spoke, her voice carried the kind of quiet authority that could stop conversations in the Pentagon. "I'm Colonel Sarah Miller, United States Army Special Forces. Someone want to tell me why my daughter is sitting on a curb surrounded by police officers?" Martinez's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. All his confidence, all his cruel laughter, all his racist assumptions, they evaporated in the face of actual authority. Because this wasn't some single mother on welfare that he could bully. This wasn't some absent parent he could mock. This was a decorated combat veteran whose security clearance probably exceeded his chief of police's, and she was asking him a direct question. "Ma'am, I didn't," she said. Martinez stammered, looking around desperately for support from Officer Johnson, from the crowd, from anyone who might help him explain how he had just spent an hour terrorizing the daughter of a Special Forces colonel. If you're getting chills watching this racist cop's world come crashing down around him, and you want to see him get the lesson he deserves, smash that subscribe button, because what Colonel Miller does next will make you want to cheer. But I have to ask you this. How many times do you think situations like this happen where the parent doesn't have the rank and authority to fight back? How many children face this kind of treatment without a colonel coming to their rescue? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Officer Johnson, who had been uncomfortable with Martinez's behavior from the beginning, stepped forward and tried to salvage the situation. But Colonel Sarah Miller's attention was focused entirely on the man who had been humiliating her daughter, and Martinez was about to learn that there are consequences for underestimating people based on the color of their skin. The reckoning was about to begin. If you're getting chills watching this racist cop's world come crashing down around him, and you want to see him get the lesson he deserves, smash that subscribe button right now. Because what Colonel Miller does next will absolutely destroy Martinez in the most satisfying way possible. You won't want to miss a single second of his humiliation. Colonel Sarah Miller didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When you've commanded troops in combat zones and briefed generals on matters of national security, You learn that real authority doesn't come from volume. It comes from presence. "Officer Martinez?" she said, reading his name tag with the kind of calm precision that made everyone in the crowd hold their breath. "I am Colonel Sarah Miller, base commander of Fort Harrison. I was delayed because I was in a classified briefing regarding regional security matters that affect this entire area. Now, I'm going to ask you again, why is my 8-year-old daughter sitting on a curb in tears?" Martinez's face had gone completely pale. His earlier bravado, his cruel laughter, his racist confidence, all of it was crumbling as he faced the reality that he had just spent an hour terrorizing the daughter of someone who outranked every person he had ever met in his 15-year career. "Ma'am, she damaged, the car had a scratch." Martinez stammered, looking around desperately for support that wasn't coming. Even Officer Johnson was now standing several feet away, clearly trying to distance himself from whatever was about to happen. "A scratch," Colonel Miller repeated, her tone perfectly level. She walked over to examine the police cruiser, her trained eye taking in the microscopic mark that had started this entire ordeal. "This scratch, the one that's barely visible, this is what justified an hour of psychological torture against my child." The crowd was dead silent now. People who had been filming the earlier confrontation were now recording this moment, sensing they were witnessing something historic. The festival had completely stopped. Even the carnival rides had gone quiet as word spread about what was happening. "But Colonel Miller," Martinez said, his voice getting more desperate, "she couldn't provide any proof of who you were. She had no identification, no photos, nothing to back up her claims about special forces." Sarah Miller's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes became absolutely deadly. "Officer Martinez, are you telling me that you expected an 8-year-old child to carry classified military documentation to a community festival?" "No, ma'am, but because let me tell you what I heard happened here today." Colonel Miller's voice remained perfectly controlled, but her words cut like surgical instruments. "I heard that you called my daughter a liar. I heard that you made racist assumptions about our family. I heard that you mocked her mother's military service. I heard that you used phrases like, 'you people,' and 'you're kind' when speaking to an 8-year-old child." Each accusation hit Martinez like a physical blow. Officer Johnson was now actively backing away, his face showing disgust as he realized exactly what kind of partner he'd been working with. Several people in the crowd were nodding, confirming that yes, they had heard every one of those statements. "Ma'am, I was just doing my job." Martinez tried weakly. "Your job?" Colonel Miller's composure never wavered, but her authority filled every inch of space around them. "Officer Martinez, did you or did you not threaten to arrest my 8-year-old daughter for an accidental scratch on your vehicle?" She was. There were procedures." "Did you or did you not tell my child that her mother probably works at McDonald's and that families like ours don't belong in this neighborhood?" Martinez was sweating now, his uniform starting to show stains under his arms, as he realized that every cruel word he had spoken was about to be accounted for. "Colonel Miller, if I had known who you were, if you had known who I was." Sarah Miller stepped closer, and Martinez actually stepped back. "Officer Martinez, the rank of the parent shouldn't matter when you're dealing with a child. The color of our skin shouldn't matter when you're dealing with a child. But since we're talking about who I am, let me be very clear." She gestured to her uniform, to the decorations that told the story of a career most people couldn't imagine. "I have served 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. I have been wounded in action defending this country. I have briefed the Joint Chiefs of Staff on matters that affect national security. I command over 3,000 soldiers at Fort Harrison. And today, I was 45 minutes late to meet my daughter because I was in a briefing about terrorist threats to this exact region." The crowd was mesmerized. This wasn't just a mother defending her child. This was a decorated war hero, dismantling a racist cop with surgical precision. But none of that, None of my rank, none of my service, none of my decorations should have been necessary for you to treat my 8-year-old daughter with basic human dignity. Martinez tried one more desperate deflection. Ma'am, I was just following protocol for unaccompanied minors. Protocol? Colonel Miller's voice carried just a hint of ice now. Officer Martinez, your protocol included racial slurs, threats against a child, and public humiliation. Tell me, is that the standard operating procedure for the Maple Grove Police Department? That's when Officer Johnson finally found his voice. No ma'am, he said, his tone making it clear he was speaking for himself, not his partner. That is absolutely not our protocol. I apologize for not intervening sooner. Colonel Miller nodded at Johnson, acknowledging his attempt to salvage some professional dignity, then turned back to Martinez. Officer Martinez, I'm going to need your supervisor down here immediately, and I'm going to need the badge number of every officer involved in this incident. Ma'am, that's really not necessary. Martinez started, but Sarah Miller cut him off with a look that could have stopped a tank. Officer, are you now refusing a direct request from a superior officer? The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because that's exactly what Martinez was facing. Not just a complaint from an angry parent, but insubordination toward a commissioned officer whose rank exceeded anyone in the local police hierarchy. Martinez fumbled for his radio with shaking hands. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need the captain to respond to the community festival. Priority 1. While they waited, Colonel Miller walked over to where Bethany was still sitting on the curb. The transformation in her demeanor was immediate and complete, from commanding officer to loving mother in an instant. Bethany, sweetheart, Mommy's here. I'm so sorry the meeting ran over. She knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms, and for the first time in over an hour, Bethany's tears were tears of relief instead of terror. I told him you were real, Mommy. Bethany whispered into her mother's uniform. I told him you were special forces, but he wouldn't believe me. I know, baby. I know. And you were so brave to tell the truth, even when it was scary. The crowd was watching this reunion with a mixture of emotions, relief, shame, and growing anger at what they had witnessed. Several people were now openly criticizing their own silence, admitting they should have spoken up sooner. Within minutes, Captain Reynolds arrived on scene, and his reaction to seeing Colonel Miller was immediate recognition. Colonel Miller, Officer Martinez, what the hell is going on here? If you're feeling the satisfaction of watching justice finally arrive, and you want to see Martinez face the consequences of his racism, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will restore your faith that sometimes the good guys really do win. Captain Reynolds listened in growing horror as Colonel Miller calmly recounted the events of the past hour. Martinez's attempts to minimize or justify his behavior fell apart under the weight of 50 eyewitnesses and his own partner's unwillingness to back up his story. Officer Martinez, Captain Reynolds said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, you are suspended from duty pending a full internal investigation. Badge and weapon, now. As Martinez handed over his badge with trembling hands, Colonel Miller stood with her daughter, watching justice finally being served. The community that had stood silent for so long was now rallying around the Miller family, with person after person approaching to apologize for not speaking up sooner. The reckoning was complete, but the lessons learned that day would last far longer than anyone imagined. As the dust settled, and Captain Reynolds drove away with the disgraced Officer Martinez, the festival grounds felt different. The tension that had gripped everyone for the past hour was finally lifting, replaced by something much more powerful. The quiet strength of a mother comforting her child and a community beginning to reckon with its own failures. Colonel Sarah Miller sat on a nearby bench with 8-year-old Bethany curled up in her lap, still wearing her full dress uniform with all its decorations catching the afternoon sunlight. For the first time since this nightmare began, Bethany felt completely safe. Mommy, why was that police officer so mean to me? Bethany asked, her voice still shaky from the trauma she'd endured. Sarah chose her words carefully, knowing that what she said now would shape how her daughter understood this experience for the rest of her life. Sometimes, sweetheart, people make judgments about others based on how they look instead of who they really are. That police officer saw a little black girl and made assumptions that weren't true or fair. But why would he do that? Because he was taught to think that way, honey? But that doesn't make it right, and that's why what happened to him today was so important. People need to face consequences when they treat others badly. Sarah then took the time to explain the complexity of her work, something she rarely discussed in detail with Bethany. She told her daughter about the classified meeting that had made her late, how military leaders from across the region had been discussing threats to national security, how decisions made in that room would protect thousands of families just like theirs, how sometimes the responsibilities of service meant making difficult choices about time and priorities. The meeting today was about keeping people safe, baby girl. People in this community, people across the state, people who don't even know that soldiers like Mommy are working every day to protect them. But I want you to understand something very important. No matter how important my job is, nothing is more important than you. Sarah's voice broke slightly as she continued. I'm so sorry I wasn't here when you needed me most. I'm sorry you had to face that man's cruelty all alone. But I'm so proud of how brave you were. You told the truth even when it was scary, and that takes real courage, the kind of courage I see in the best soldiers I command. The crowd that had gathered to witness Martinez's downfall was still lingering, but now they were approaching the Miller family with very different intentions. What happened next was perhaps even more powerful than Martinez's comeuppance. It was a community learning to confront its own complicity in injustice. One by one, people began coming forward to apologize. Not just to Sarah, but specifically to 8-year-old Bethany, recognizing her as the victim who deserved their respect and protection. I'm so sorry we didn't help you, said Mrs. Henderson, a middle-aged woman who had been standing in the crowd the entire time. Her voice was thick with genuine shame. I kept thinking someone else would step in, that it wasn't my place to interfere with police business. But that was wrong of me. You were scared and alone, and we adults should have protected you. An elderly man approached next, leaning heavily on his walking cane. Young lady, he said directly to Bethany, I served in Vietnam, and I've seen courage in many forms. What you showed today, standing up for your mother, telling the truth when that officer tried to make you doubt yourself, that's real courage. I should have recognized it sooner and stood with you. A teenage boy approached, his face red with shame and his phone clutched in his hand. I recorded some of what happened, he admitted quietly. I thought it was just drama, something to post online. I didn't think about how scared you must have been or how wrong it was to treat you like entertainment. I'm sorry. I deleted the videos, and I promise if I ever see something like this again, I'll put down my phone and help instead. A young mother with 2 small children in tow knelt down to Bethany's eye level. Sweetie, my kids and I watched what happened to you, and it's not okay. I should have brought my children over to stand with you, to show that officer that you weren't alone. Instead, I pulled them away because I was scared. But being scared isn't an excuse for letting a child be hurt. Even Officer Johnson, Martinez's former partner, approached the family with genuine remorse that went beyond professional courtesy. His voice carried the weight of someone who understood he'd failed in a fundamental way. Colonel Miller, Bethany, I want you to know that not all of us are like Martinez. But today I realize that's not enough. I should have stepped in sooner. I should have shut him down the moment he started with the racist comments. I failed your daughter, and I failed my oath as an officer to protect and serve all citizens equally. Johnson paused, looking directly at Bethany. You were braver today than I was, and I'm a grown man with a badge and a gun. That's something I have to live with, and something I'm going to make sure never happens again on my watch. Sarah appreciated his honesty. Officer Johnson, recognizing when we've made mistakes is the first step toward making sure they don't happen again. What matters now is what we all do moving forward. My daughter and I, we don't want your guilt. We want your commitment to do better. As more and more people approached to apologize, something beautiful and transformative began happening. The community that had stood silent during Bethany's ordeal was now coming together to support the Miller family. But more importantly, they were using this moment for genuine self-reflection and change. Parents were kneeling down to talk to their own children about what they had witnessed, explaining why silence in the face of injustice was itself a form of harm. Teenagers were approaching other teenagers, discussing how they could recognize and respond to discrimination when they saw it. Adults were exchanging phone numbers, forming impromptu committees to ensure something like this never happened again in their community. The festival organizers approached Sarah with a request that surprised even her. "Colonel Miller, would you be willing to address the entire festival? People need to hear from you. And honestly, we think the whole community needs to process what happened here today together." What Sarah said next would be remembered by everyone who heard it, quoted in local newspapers, and eventually become part of the training materials used by police departments across the state. "I've served my country for over 15 years, Sarah began, her voice carrying easily across the now quiet festival grounds as hundreds of people gathered to listen. "I've been deployed to combat zones where I've seen the worst that humanity has to offer, but I've also seen incredible acts of courage and compassion. Today, right here in your community, I saw both extremes." She paused, looking around at the faces, some ashamed, some determined, all listening intently. "The uniform I'm wearing today represents sacrifice, not just mine, but the sacrifice of every service member who has ever put their life on the line for the ideals this country was founded on. Ideals like equality, justice, and the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. But today, I learned that wearing the uniform doesn't automatically make you a hero. My daughter, an 8-year-old child, showed more heroism in 1 hour than many trained soldiers show in their entire careers." Bethany stood beside her mother now, no longer hiding or cowering, but standing proud next to Colonel Mom, her small hand clasped firmly in her mother's. "What my daughter experienced today, the racism, the threats, the systematic attempt to break her spirit, that's not the America I've spent my career defending. But what happens next, how we respond to this moment, that's what will define who we really are as a community and as a nation." The crowd was absolutely silent, hanging on every word, many wiping tears from their eyes. "I don't want your apologies for what happened today. Apologies are words, and words fade. What I want is your promise that the next time you see injustice, especially when it involves a child, you won't wait for someone else to act. I want you to remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you are afraid." Sarah's voice grew stronger, more commanding. "I want you to teach your children that a person's worth isn't determined by the color of their skin, the neighborhood they come from, or the assumptions others make about their family. I want you to raise a generation that sees an 8-year-old girl being bullied by an authority figure and immediately thinks, 'How can I help?' Not, 'How can I avoid getting involved?'" She gestured to the diverse crowd around them. "This community has an opportunity now. You can let this moment pass and go back to your comfortable assumptions. Or you can use it to build something better. You can ensure that no child, black, white, brown, or any other color, ever has to face what my daughter faced today." Sarah put her arm around Bethany, who beamed up at her mother with pure adoration and newfound confidence. "My daughter told the truth today. Even when a man in authority told her she was lying, she maintained her dignity even when someone tried to strip it away. She showed faith in her family even when others mocked that faith. She showed more courage in 1 hour than many adults show in a lifetime. If an 8-year-old can stand up for what's right under that kind of pressure, then surely the rest of us can too." The applause started slowly, but grew into something thunderous and sustained. People weren't just clapping for Sarah's words. They were applauding for a little girl's bravery, for a mother's strength, for their own commitment to do better, and for the possibility of real change in their community. As the crowd began to disperse, many people lingered, forming small groups to continue the conversation, to make concrete plans for how they could create lasting change. Some were organizing sensitivity training for local businesses. Others were planning community forums about racial bias. Teachers were discussing how to incorporate these lessons into their classrooms. But for Sarah and Bethany, the most important moment was still to come. "Now, young lady," Sarah said, kneeling down to her daughter's eye level, "I believe I owe you a day at the festival. Are you ready to have some fun?" Bethany's face lit up with the first completely carefree smile she'd worn all day. "Can we get cotton candy, Mommy? And can you win me a stuffed animal at the ring toss? And can we go on the Ferris wheel so everyone can see my mom in her uniform?" "Sweetheart, after what you've been through today, you can have anything you want. And yes, we're definitely going on that Ferris wheel. I want everyone to see how proud I am of my brave little girl. If this story of courage, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right has moved you, hit that subscribe button and share this video, because stories like this need to be told. And lessons like this need to be learned by everyone. Here's what I want to know from you. After watching Bethany's story, what would you do differently the next time you witness injustice? Will you be part of the solution, or will you be part of the silent crowd? Your answer could literally change someone's life. So let me know in the comments. As mother and daughter walked hand in hand toward the carnival rides, Sarah still in her decorated military uniform and Bethany skipping alongside her with newfound confidence, the entire festival seemed transformed. Children pointed excitedly at the real soldier and asked their parents if they could meet her. Parents used the moment to teach their kids about courage and standing up for others. Festival workers offered free rides and treats to the Miller family, but perhaps the most touching moment came when a group of children, Black, white, Hispanic, and Asian kids who had witnessed the earlier confrontation, approached Bethany and asked if she wanted to play with them. For the first time all day, Bethany was just a kid again, laughing and running around with new friends while her mother watched proudly from nearby. The local news crews that had arrived to cover the story were struck by the transformation they witnessed. What had started as a story about police misconduct had become something much more powerful, a story about community healing, childhood resilience, and the possibility for real change when people are forced to confront uncomfortable truths. 6 months later, the ripple effects of that day were still being felt throughout the region. Officer Derek Martinez had completed mandatory sensitivity training and 200 hours of community service, much of it spent working with local civil rights organizations. He would never patrol the Maple Grove area again, and his case became a cautionary tale used in police academies across the state. The Maple Grove Police Department implemented new policies requiring immediate supervisor intervention when officers received complaints about their conduct. Officer Johnson was promoted and became head of the department's new Community Relations Division. The community itself had changed dramatically. The festival became an annual celebration not just of local businesses and families, but of diversity and inclusion. Schools in the district incorporated lessons about recognizing and confronting bias into their curricula. Local businesses began hosting regular forums about creating inclusive environments. But perhaps most importantly, Bethany Miller had grown into a confident young girl who understood both the reality of prejudice and her own power to stand against it. She often accompanied her mother to speaking engagements, where Sarah would tell their story to police academies, community groups, and military leadership courses. And every year on the anniversary of that day, the Millers would return to the festival, not as victims of injustice, but as symbols of the change that's possible when good people decide to do what's right. Sometimes the good guys really do win. Sometimes justice really is served. And sometimes one little girl's courage can change an entire community. Today was one of those days, and the lessons learned would last for generations to come. The final image that day was of Colonel Sarah Miller and her daughter Bethany at the top of the Ferris wheel, visible to everyone at the festival. A decorated war hero and her brave little girl silhouetted against the sunset, representing the best of what America could be when people choose courage over comfort, action over apathy, and love over hate. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.